All right. Welcome, everybody. I think this is a special episode. It may be our 50th episode of Crash Labs. And because of that, I have some very special guests on the show. I have the superhero and rock star of mining, Chris Taylor, famous for his crazy exit in Great Bear, which he did over a span of, is it 3 years?
Well, Great Bear was it was a decadal project for me. So
No, I mean like it maybe like the grind was long, but like when the fun stuff started happening. And I apologize. I know a lot of people put a lot of tears and efforts into the grind, and a lot of people don't see that. But like when things really got going,
it was probably about a 4-year process between when we started getting serious interest from majors and the deal was inked.
very cool. And we'll touch on that on how you got there. Thank you very much for being on the show. Also, another special guest in Jordan Black. I would say that he hopes to have the next Great Bear. Early stages, but things look pretty good. The CEO and was it the CEO of RAMP Metals?
Thanks for having me on, Cejay.
Thanks for coming by, guys. So, Chris, what do you do up to these days? Are you enjoying your life a little bit after a decade of grinding it out, and then finally the euphoric slam of the sale and enjoying life, or you can't get away from it, the thrill of the deal? You can't get away from the thrill of the deal.
Well, I'm discovering, somebody. I guess it's a bit of a litmus test for the individual, but when all your dreams come true and your project comes to fruition and you make a bunch of money for yourself and your shareholders, you kind of imagine that you're going to become this better, more rounded, accomplished version of yourself. And then you discover that is absolutely not the case. And you're the same person you were before you had the big transaction. And in fact, you can't stop looking at projects, and you waste far too much of your time going down rabbit holes on Twitter or X, what it's called now. So it was a bit of a journey of self-discovery in the fact that maybe there isn't a lot more about me to discover other than this sort of passion to make things happen.
So what drove you before and what drives you now? Still the same things? The passion to learn, passion to make more money?
For me, it was never about the money per se. And it sounds kind of ridiculous to say that, but I had a really, really good boss when I worked at a company called Imperial Metals. I was working at the Mount Poly mine, Red Chris. We put a gold project into production in Nevada called Sterling. My boss was this guy, Pat McCandless. And he told me at the time, and I was just getting my career going in the early 2000s, and he said, don't focus on the money and don't focus on your job title. Just focus on doing the really good work, and the money will come after that. And he was absolutely correct. So money was never a motivator, primary one for me. It was mostly looking after my family. I've got 2 kids, teenagers now, my wife, Julie. So I always wanted to be a good dad and take care of them. And, just apply what I had learned in school, use good scientific principles, and work with really good people. And that was sort of the formula that got it over the line at the end of the day.
So on the opposite side of the career spectrum, I guess, we have Jordan. And I'm not sure if you know too much about RAMP Metals. Have you been following his story at all?
Like RAMP, yeah, they had some interesting drill holes recently, in particular some multi-zoned high-grade gold. So I did see that. I think it was in a sheared diorite in Saskatchewan, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct.
Why don't you give like the 30-minute elevator?
Yeah, sure. So I guess a bit of background on myself, Chris, if you don't know already. I'm a civil engineer by trade. I was geotech, building roads and infrastructure for mines, sometimes feasibility studies, but I was never a geo, maybe just enough to be dangerous. And then, like I was mentioning earlier, I got into this whole Bitcoin scene pretty early and tried to start a mining operation where we went down the path of selling 100 megawatts of power for like $40 million in the craze. And it was like a crazy experience because I was never involved in the VC world, and that kind of crashed and burned when the Bitcoin price went down. But it actually led to the VC world, and that's where I got to meet Denis. We both worked for 3D Capital together, and one of our largest investments was Gold Spot Discoveries, and that's where I ended up joining the team with Denis and Cejay. and really fell in love with like early exploration. I guess fast forward to 2 years ago, I was introduced to these two younger geos. When I say younger, 10 plus years of experience in Saskatchewan, and they just loved their province and always wanted to make a discovery in their backyard. So they showed me their property, and it was this little eye structure based on the regional data. They compared it to the Nova Bollinger in Australia, and I thought that's pretty interesting. But what's most important to me is the team, and can I work with these guys? So I agreed to be the CEO of RAMP Metals at that time, and we raised a little bit of seed money to go explore the eye structure. And what we did is we flew TDEM and EM across the whole property. And that really defined this eye structure where we had this really nice magnetic eye with about 4 conductors in and around. And I guess fast forward to our RTO round where the drills started turning. We were testing the main conductor, and we had about 3 holes planned for that. That was right in the middle of the eye. And then when we were flying out there to cut the drill pads, and look, this property's never been worked before. We were like the first ones to go out there. And we kind of did it backwards where we just went and drilled first before even going out on the property. So when we headed out there, we took surface samples as we were cutting the drill pads, and we saw some bedrock on the smaller anomaly. And that was later to be the discovery hole on the east side. But when we were taking chip samples, we saw that there was, I guess we got gold in the surface. So those samples came back 5 grams per ton, and we're like, okay, we might as well throw a wildcat hole down there. And when we were drilling it, we were actually looking for a sulfide conductor around 50 meters down, and we kept drilling. Once we punched through that, we hit the quartz diorite, and we got to 200 meters and then 300 meters. We were still in it. We thought we'd come out maybe around 3 or 350, but we were running out of time, so we just called the hole. And Garrett always made the joke, like if we were going to make a kitchen company, this would be great countertop for that company. So that's like the running joke. And then finally we got the assays back on like a Friday night, and I was actually sitting with my dad on the porch. He's from, well, I'm from Sault Ste. Marie, and he was visiting from there. My parents still live up there. And I got the results as I'm talking to him, and the geo sent it to me in PPB. So I had to like kind of do some quick mental math. I'm like, holy cow, those are some big results.
It's an amazing feeling, eh, when you see the good numbers first come in and you know that your life is going to get really interesting.
Yeah, it was like surreal. It's like you almost don't believe it at first. The first thing I'm asking is, okay, like where are the check standards in this?
Good.
Do you remember what you were doing when you got the big holes back from Dixie, the big one after all the work?
The first ones, we discovered a number of zones there at Dixie Lake. I mean, I guess they call it the Great Bear Project now. That Kinross has it. I remember actually, I had finally, after years and years of relative, austerity in the family, finally gone off, and I was on vacation with my wife for the first time in a decade, and we were in England. And I was in a hotel room, and it was kind of the middle of the night, and a bunch of assays came in from Bob Singh, and it was pretty amazing. Like just this immediately, I was like, oh my God, almost the same thought process that Jordan just had there. I was like, is this actually real? Are these in the right place? And it was like a 20-meter interval of high grade, and you just know that your life is going to take a dramatic turn. In my case, and a lot of guys, when they're trying to put a company together, it's going to take a turn for the better, and that's extremely exciting. So, yeah, that sense of euphoria, it's right up there with having a child or something in your family or something like that.
Yeah, euphoria, but then a little bit of being scared at the same time, not knowing what's going to come in the future.
Not so much. I mean, like by that point, after several years in the junior mining sector, you've kind of dealt with the bad stuff, the inability to finance and the inability to get meetings for people to even listen to your story when it's really early stage. And as everybody that follows Great Bear knew, I was hundreds of thousands of dollars in personal debt just keeping the company going off my home equity line of credit. So I'd been through the bad times. So the fear had existed. But this was seeing like the brainchild of, a brilliant guy like Bob Singh, a brilliant guy like that, and seeing the brainchild kind of come together. So it was really a good feeling. There wasn't a lot of fear at that point because we'd already dealt with the bad stuff.
So was that leading up to it? Was it just because you kind of had a new geological theory? 'Cause from what I recall, you were exploring a new kind of rock versus what was historically found in that area,
Like,
the Balmer versus Confederation.
yeah, CJ, that ultimately is correct, but the first discovery was actually in the Balmer type rocks, like within those more mafic volcanics, and this is a stepwise process where every discovery we made the project that much better. The LP discovery, when we made that one like a year later, that was the one that was in those Confederation type felsic volcanic type units, and I mean that was incredible. Like that was like you know, you're going from positive to incredibly positive. It was a totally different transformative experience.
So when you made the discovery, did you have a number in mind of how much you wanted to raise to follow up on this, or was it just we're going to take as much as we can after this nuclear winter that we went through? What was going through your mind there?
To give you a bit more of a considered answer, when you make a discovery like that, or like any of these ones that we made, you have a lot of pressure on you from the financial industry and even from within the company as well to go, use the expression balls to the wall and, get like 10 or 12 drill rigs out there. And especially with the LP discovery, we had gold over kilometer after kilometer, same rocks, and we just kept hitting it. And that was more the push on my mind not to get ahead of the science. And I was always pulling back on the reins. It was like, felt like you were in the old times riding a chariot, holding on to the reins and trying to keep these horses back from just going absolutely crazy. So like that was part of the process, was to stay with the science. So we actually understood what was going on. And if you don't control the scope of the project and match the financings to the work that needs to be done and not what financial markets want to see, you can end up in a very dilutive situation, or you can end up with a lot of people owning the stock that ultimately reduce the options for the company in terms of its go forward pathways and the ability to get the most value for your shareholders. So you got to be really careful that
Interesting.
way. Yeah.
Interesting. Because I've always heard the old adage, like, friend or foe, take the dough. Especially in our markets, you never know when the money's not going to be there. So when you have the opportunity to take it, especially when you don't need it, you take in as much as you can. So, I imagine that you had everyone knocking on your door after that drill hole.
Yeah, look, we struggled to raise money for the RTO. It was a nickel project at that time, and although battery metals are picking up, nickel was still trending lower. So it was tough to raise money. But man, once you hit that high discovery hole, your phone doesn't stop ringing. Like, I was taking 6 hours of meetings a day. But between the board and management at RAMP, we all decided that, look, we're going to just try to slow down, wait for the right investor to come, and if they have a long-term perspective, then we'll pull the trigger. And that's what we did. We waited for Eric to come in and offer us a deal. And I actually thank the Earth Labs guy. Denis called me up, and he kind of introduced me to Eric and pushed that through.
So the way you ran Great Bear, Chris, a lot of people have taken, some of the stuff that you've done and tried to apply it to their companies. Some of it, like, did you always plan on not releasing a resource? And like, did the big majors really care about that when it was all said and done? Like, was that like your master plan, or like let the market speculate? Let's not put a cap on this. Like, so what were you thinking? Or was that also the plan, like ultimately the plan, and you just didn't get there?
No, it was not having a resource out there, if possible, was always the plan. And mainly the reason was like we had a lot of skepticism on the project early on, which is natural because it was a major new discovery and it will be a very big mine over a very long period of time. But we had a lot of groups in the industry accusing us of stuff like twinning holes or fabricating results or all the usual gambit. It was actually quite challenging early on to go through that route. So what I ended up doing was, I remember sitting down with the board and all of our guys, and I was like, guys, we need to have really, really good data transparency. And we got to the point where the best way to address some of these concerns was to issue every single assay result. Like, we did it visually, we put it a cross section, and every assay result. And instead of just issuing like a composite interval, we'd put out every assay result on the cross sections. And that way people couldn't accuse of subgrade smearing or, saying that there was unmineralized intervals or whatever the case was. It just put all the data out at different scales so people can understand it. So once you do that, when the data disclosure is really, really good and really, really transparent, like the industry is full of bright people on the analytical side. These guys are, they're smarter than me. They can do resource calculations really easily. You let those guys do the work, like let them do the work. They find it interesting. They get ahead of it. Once those analytical reports go out to their distribution networks, it generates a lot of interest on its own. So you have to let that process happen. And on the major side, a major will often use a published resource as a hammer to hit you over the head with, in the sense that they'll give you a valuation that's based on what's in the public domain for disclosure, and they're not going to give you a lot of valuation for the upside. But when we're sitting on like a tier 1 project like our discovery, and that they perceive it to be a tier 1 project, and so do their competitors, so you have a number of parties that are doing this, the best thing to do is let them figure it out on their own. You're showing them the opportunity, you're showing them the data, and they're getting to the point where they see the scale. You're not having to force them to understand a mechanism. They're the ones, you're giving them an option, and they kind of drag you towards the final point at the end. So if it's possible and it's a major discovery like that, clearly like a world-class discovery, letting them do the work can be a very effective approach.
I think that's one thing I always looked up to that you guys did well at Great Bear was the data transparency. One of my good friends, Mitch Vanderite, he worked for 8 Capital at the time. And you guys would always do these data dumps, and he loved it. He would pull out his Excel model and say, like, look, this company doesn't have a resource, but I think they're going to have 8 million ounces or 5 million ounces, whatever it was at the time. And he's like, you should really invest in this company. And I was following it obviously from pretty early stages. I think when it was 50 cents when you got your first McEwen investment, and ever since then, I think that data transparency is so important. And CJ, you took a data company public, and I think a lot of companies make the mistake of hiding that data, and in the end, it only brings them, I think, harm.
So is that the plan moving forward? Super transparency?
Yeah, and RAMP is going to be an open book. When it's available to the public, we'll have that information up on our website, and you can do with what you please with that data and make your own calculations, right?
Amen.
Yeah. Hopefully it's more than one hole then, or else it'll be a pretty easy data dump, eh?
Exactly. Maybe we can get the AI out and run it on the one hole and see if we could.
I'll just chat GBT. Is this good? And they're like, it was good.
Yeah, no, the biggest thing now is for us to try to get 5,000 meters of drilling and actually get some real data and see how big this thing can be.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's crazy. You'd think once you make a discovery, you'd sleep a bit better, but I could tell you there's always something to do the next day. I don't know, Chris, do you sleep better now?
Oh, 100%. Also, we had, it used to drive my wife crazy, but we were predominantly retail owned right up to the moment we were transacted. I think it was 65% retail ownership with $1.5 billion market cap basically towards the end there. And that meant a lot of time on the phone because those guys are a lot of work. So you make good friends, but it doesn't matter what time of night or day or whatever it is, you are talking on the phone. So, it's it's a lot of work, even when you're on top of something incredible like that ultimately will generate a lot of its own momentum.
You were able to keep your share structure pretty tight, eh? Like you didn't raise a lot when it was all said and done. I think it was like $150 million from the big discovery.
Yeah, that's exactly about right. And that was there's a whole bunch of factors behind that, but the main one was that philosophy that we wouldn't raise more than we needed at each phase, and we wanted to let the science lead instead of the market factors lead, and ultimately everybody appreciated that, including the final sell price.
Yeah. What? How did the royalty spin out happen? That was another cool thing that your company pioneered.
Well, it kind of came out of necessity, and I guess most people wouldn't really think about that. But one of the things I really enjoy personally is strategy games. When I was in university, I probably was at risk of dropping out of university because I had like Civilizations 2 on my computer. And you got to think about these things, like the moves that you're making, the messaging that you're making. It's very strategic. It can be very tactical at times as well. So the royalty spinout, obviously, it came out of a desire to add additional value for shareholders and our First Nations partners, because they ended up owning the royalty spinout as well. But one of the main reasons was that we could not get traction on the story with certain parties, and I won't name any names, but I would go into meetings internationally in the U.S., across Canada, with fund managers, and there had been competing groups that did not like us and did not like our story, who had gone in ahead of us and basically told everybody that it was fake and we were making things up and it would never work, and it's a Red Lake project, there's no continuity to these, every kind of hit in the book. So I needed a way to get the analyst community to take the project seriously and take the results seriously. And one of the ways was basically getting them to try to put a valuation on the royalty spinout. So remember that when it was first announced publicly, I remember walking into a bank meeting and having the analyst there and the banker say, well, this is like a joke, right? Like, you're not going to actually spin this out. You're just doing this for some other reason. And I said, no, I was thinking in the back of my head, well, there is an ulterior motive here, so that we can have this conversation and you're forced to run these numbers. But really it was because we saw an opportunity, and that it worked. Like, it worked really, really well, because when the analyst community had to look at the data, they had to go through this sort of transparent data disclosure and start building models of their own. And they had to overcome the naysaying that they were getting a lot of in the background. They were like, wow, it is real. Like, this is a real discovery. And the valuation of the company dramatically increased around the time of the royalty announcement and the royalty spinout because of that as well.
So at that time, what was the valuation of Great Bear? Like when you did the royalty spin?
Like, I'd have to go back on a share chart and look, but it was, we would have been looking at something that was less than a third of the final sale value.
Okay, so you're already like 20,000 meters of drilling in type thing.
Yeah, there was enough data for people to really sink their teeth into it, into the LP discovery as well, over like 4 or 5 kilometers of strike length. And we were getting accusations that we were drilling on cross structures or somehow artificially increasing the strike length and the grade. And really, of course, we knew we weren't smart enough to do any of that. We just had a very simplistic model that showed up really predictable in the 3D modeling that our guys were doing. And it was just a big predictable gold system. So we just wanted people to look at it, without a bias. And the spin out really helped them do that.
It's a weird sector where, like, we're so small, but there's so many people that poo-poo you, like, no matter what. Like, aren't big wins good for everyone here? That's always been my mentality. You don't have to do that. Like, who were the ones saying all of that? Is just like crotchety old geologists that didn't want to believe in it, or was it just like people that were late to the deal, or was just random guys on CEO.CA?
I won't name any names, but it was there was a bit of a campaign that way for sure. So
maybe they wanted it cheap. Never know.
That's a good point, though. We need these big wins for the whole space.
Yeah, like Philo. You see that this morning?
That was huge.
That's a big win.
I did not see that news today. Why don't you guys educate me while we're on the call?
Oh, Lundin and BHP are buying them for over $4 billion.
Oh, awesome. Well, congratulations. I'm going to give it a round of applause in my mind. That's fantastic.
Oh, nice. Are you in it? Celebration drink there.
Exactly.
That's what you can do when you're retired, day drinking.
Drinking some tea. This is turmeric tea. It's very hardcore,
Oh, yeah. Very good for you. Is that how you keep your hair so nice and black?
Oh my God.
Turmeric.
Well, it was actually falling out. If anybody knows me from back in the day when I was hundreds of grand in debt trying to keep Great Bear going, my hair was actually, somebody described me as a bowling ball. So I'd have these just chunks of hair that would fall out and they'd grow back in white. And then eventually, with everything resolving, it all grew back, which is, it's not supposed to do, but it actually did.
Yeah.
So non-surgically, I might add.
Yeah.
So there's totally stress related then,
Yeah,
right? Like that's crazy.
you can tell the performance of his stock by the blotchiness of his
Yeah,
head.
exactly.
Yeah.
Uh,
Your hair still looks nice. We'll
I'm
come
getting a
back.
few gray hairs now, like since the discoveries.
My gray hairs is from my kids. Like directly related. So do you still keep in touch with Kinross after when it was all said and done? Like how did that come about? Like can you describe how a junior explorationist eventually sells out to a senior?
oh man, well that's quite the discussion. Um,
Well, when did they first make contact? Like when along the Lassonde curve did they reach out to you?
I gotta give them credit. Like they have a guy on staff named Graham Long, who's a bit of a geological genius. I would describe him. And they visited the project like I think 4 years before they ended up buying it. Like it was a long term process. And Graham, I got to hand it to him. Like he's in charge of all their brownfields exploration, like kind of globally, or he was. I'd have to check what he's doing exactly right now. But he liked the project right from the get go, even before we found the LP fault zone, just based on the Red Lake potential. He's quite familiar with those kind of models. And it's a long process. Like there's no shortcuts there. Right. So big companies, like they're kind of like governments. They don't actually move that fast. And like, they don't want to look like morons basically if they make the wrong investment or the wrong acquisition. So it was a multi-year due diligence process, and of course we had other parties that were looking at us at the same time. And like I could just anecdotally share, like there were some tells during this process when I knew that there would be like a deal in the works. After lots of tire kicking, like year after year of tire kicking, basically. And a few things for me, like you're going to see inevitably, like as you climb up that due diligence ladder, the composition of the teams of people that are visiting the project are going to change. The level of secrecy involved in those visits is going to increase. And you get these weird questions at the end of the day. Like I remember, we had a meeting where there was some geos visiting, and they were asking like really particular questions. And my background, like I used to work in mining, so I always have these sort of thoughts in the back of my head. And I was pretty sure that something was going to come to a head when there was a technical team visiting, and it was really an odd series of questions. But the weird thing that they did was they turned to one of our geos and they said, "Well, do you have any carbonate alteration here?" And the geo was answering, "No, not really, like very little," and all this. And they kind of, I could see the team from the major all look at each other, and one of them pulls out a bottle of dilute hydrochloric acid and just dumps it through about 2 meters on the core, and it's like fizzing over the entire length of the core. And extremely important because there is actually a big carbonate alteration overprint on the Great Bear project. And, that's really important for future acid neutralization in a mining context. So if these guys internally, I knew what data they had. I knew they were doing resource modeling. I knew they were doing like mine planning and this kind of stuff because that's what you would do. And when they were looking at this, the question they didn't have is this thing going to be acid generating? Is it going to have an environmental footprint? And it doesn't. It's actually acid neutralizing. So those are little tells while you're playing that sort of discussionary game with everybody that really show you that they're in a much more advanced stage of analysis than you would think.
Yeah, when they're thinking that far down the line.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So you said they were on site for 4 years before the LP discovery. So they're pretty
sale.
on.
Yeah, before the sale. Yeah.
Yeah, 4 years. So that was like very early on, and then up the food chain after that.
Yeah, that's right. It just kept escalating.
Yeah, 4 years is pretty good. COVID probably slowed you down a little bit, I'd imagine, because I think COVID was in the middle of your discovery. Right?
Yeah, like we managed to do some of the discovery drilling the year before COVID, and then we managed to keep it going during COVID and forest fires. And I really hand it to all of our staff there that was in Red Lake. They really did a hell of a job keeping everything running, because there was times when we thought we were going to get shut down either due to, imagine trying to get drillers in at the beginning of COVID. we were working with Shibugamu Drilling, and they were able to bring people directly, like fly them directly in, on private planes, and have complete isolation of the work crews from the outside world. And it was a real logistical exercise, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I'm always trying to look at the Lassonde curve and see where does RAMP fit in compared to when Great Bear made their sale, or one of our advisors, Mark Bennett, when he sold Sirius Resource. So Mark did it in exactly 2 years and 6 months from the discovery hole.
Yeah.
He sold for 1.8 billion, similar to you guys, and you did it in 4. So if RAMP can do it between 2 and 4, then we're doing something right?
You should do it now. Like, just undercut everyone and take the record.
Yeah, well, now we have to do 2 years and 5 months then, because we beat Mark by a month.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think in your mind, Chris, you knew that you weren't going to take it to development or anything if you knew that you didn't want to put a resource on it, right? So, like, right at discovery, did you know that you wanted to sell it as soon as you could at the most moolah for the kula?
Well, like, we are familiar with the Lassonde curve, which is actually, I got to hand it to Pierre. That is brilliant branding to name something like that after yourself. It's like, we need to name something after Taylor, like the Taylor sale process or something like this. So, but yeah, you're very familiar with that, right? So
I'll bring that. I'll keep on using the Taylor sale. Maybe you, Jordy, you can get the Taylor sale.
Yeah, Taylor sold at the top of the curve.
Yeah.
So like they should brand that, like have the Lassonde curve and put Taylor as a check mark.
The peak of the first apex. No,
so I'll do that. I'll do you that solid.
Thanks, man. Now I know you got my back.
Yeah.
No, like we didn't know for sure, right? And to be honest, if you want to get taken seriously as a credible threat and really increase the competitive tension, your board is going to have to change throughout the discovery process. And we brought in like some really qualified people, like Mike Kenyon, Gil Lawson, Paula Rogers. These were guys that got added on as the company like expanded and it started to move towards a development kind of model. And like Gil Lawson, for instance, would have been a really good guy to take it through ultimately, potentially as a COO or something like this to build this out on the mining side. And like, you're never, if you have a for sale sign on the lawn the entire time, you're never going to get peak value because people know you're a motivated seller. So, you have to be ready to take it long term, right?
Yeah. Very cool.
You might want to do one, but you've got to be ready to do the other. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think you've done, like, going through what you've done, it sounds awesome. It sounds like you're like, I'm going to do this. And it was like the right move. And all of a sudden, we have the Taylor sale. Is there anything that you've done that you regret?
Oh my God. My life is just it's like a library. See the library behind me as we're talking, that could be, every book could be a different type of regret, and I think some of the biggest regrets that I have are letting things get to me during the whole process with Great Bear. Like, in terms of implementation off a major discovery and getting it sold, like, I don't have any regrets. Like, we got very good value at the end of the day. By the time we found the LP discovery, it was like 2019, and we were sold by 2021, right? So even though we had other discoveries before that, so I don't regret anything there. I do think. I do think we made the best of the available situation. So the regrets that I have are really on the personal level. That it really is all consuming. Like, your job is like a marriage, right? As the CEO of a little junior company like this, you're like married to that company, and that means you spend a lot of sleepless nights every waking moment of your life. As soon as your eyes open in the morning, you're thinking about what the next strategy is, how to implement it, who you're going to call, and when you're in the shower, you're on the can. Every waking minute. So my regrets are more around, like, on the family side. I wish I could have had some mechanism to turn the brain off for a little bit during some of that, just so that I could be present with the people that I love and care about and was doing all the hard work for. So really, it's advice on a personal level to these CEOs. Find a way to turn your brain off and disconnect from all that noise, and that'll save your hair from falling out in chunks when you're in the middle of the process.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually.
Yeah. So what are you going to do?
Well, I think obviously RAMP or any junior company is like a marriage, and I'm married as well with a 7-year-old. But one thing I've learned, because I've made a few mistakes in my business career, right? Like I sold a company for 40 million and then got $0, so that gave some gray hair, right? But this time around, Ramp is not going anywhere. The drill holes aren't going anywhere. The drillers will be there. People can wait one day, but I think what I want to do is always make sure I'm at my kid's baseball game or hockey game or whatever it is.
I think like entrepreneurial hours, like when we were out of the get-go back in like 2015, 16, when, you know, we had Goldspot spinning out of the resource bank, and then all of a sudden like a lot of cool other companies coming out of that. But the kid, like what you said, the kids were a lot younger. They, like, we always made time for them, and I was lucky that I was working from home at the time because we couldn't afford an office. But
yeah, that's one thing that's really changed since COVID is we get to work from home a lot, and that actually allows for more family time. And obviously, the phone doesn't turn off, so people can always reach you. But you gotta, I guess, to Chris's advice as well, like maybe just turn that phone off sometimes.
how when you were you road showing a lot? Like, were you traveling a lot at like during the rise of Great Bear? Like, were you doing the German shows? Were you not?
I was like, I kept tabs once. So Rita Bennett was our sort of VP communications, who was helping me run all this stuff. And we were traveling, I was on the road. It was almost like, it was like 55% of the time. Like I had some super flight status. Like this was before COVID. So people didn't want to do Zoom meetings. So literally if you wanted a quick meeting in Zurich, you had to fly to Zurich or London or, you know, San Francisco. Whatever, and so you just get used to existing on a plane. So,
and you're out of Vancouver, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, so that's even worse of a flight.
So you're out of those time zones by a very healthy margin most of the time.
I think people still like in-person one-on-ones. Like, I think during COVID, everyone's like, "Oh, Zoom is awesome now," but I still think, especially in our sector, people still like the one-on-ones.
Yeah, totally. People value that like Thursday afternoon meeting or morning coffee, whatever it is. I think people crave meeting in person since all the COVID Zooms, right?
The old school brokers, they still want to meet with you for a beer, and you're like, I don't want to do this. Really.
When you meet people for the first time, especially, it's way better in person. But some of the touch base maintenance meetings, they can be done by Zoom like pretty effectively.
Yeah, like today you're calling in here. I actually thought you were coming in person, so I was like,
I know.
I was telling Cejay, oh, I wonder when he's gonna get.
He's like, he had a picture of you. He's like, I'm gonna get him to sign this, and I'm like, he's not coming in. I'm like, he's not coming in today. He's like, what? I'm like, he's not gonna fly in just to speak with you. He's like, I'm like, he's on the West Coast. So maybe next time. Do you travel? Do you go to any shows still? You gonna go to Beaver Creek?
Yeah, like I'm looking at a lot of deals right now for my shell. I bought a little CPC called Railtown Capital, and I've been looking at like, oh man, turning over a lot of rocks. So I actually told people like I didn't go on any of the shows and I didn't go to any of the fishing stuff or whatever. I did go to PDAC this year in Toronto because I've been to so many PDACs in a row. I just feel like I need to go. But until I have something substantive to really talk about, I've just been doing my own due diligence. And I do like hanging out at the ranch here. It's very peaceful and conducive to thought processes. So, you know, I'm
It's smoky out there though.
A little
right?
bit, yeah. I can see the mountains today, but ultimately it is a little bit smoky. And fortunately, I'm not on fire, which I really enjoy.
When your name is on fire, like when you joined the CPC, it went up a gajillion percent just based on the name.
Well,
can you believe that? I mean, you should be using your name even more.
But that's not, it's not my way, right? So right now I'm on a unicorn hunt for a really, really good project or opportunity.
What are you looking for? Like any particular jurisdiction, commodity?
Yeah, it's funny, like politics, the world has changed, eh? You know, like we're not in a better world than we were in 5 years ago, or maybe we're just seeing more of its true nature. But there is like a balkanization in sort of global spheres of influence. It seems a little bit like a Cold War 2.0. So I'm looking at jurisdictions that I think will be easy to access, you know, going forward, and you know, in an environment where there's more sort of geopolitical competition. And so, yeah, safe jurisdictions. I've been looking at a variety of commodities, mostly on the gold and copper side, because these are things I think have excellent long-term value prospects. But ultimately, if people have really good projects, I'll look at just about anything. It's just generally Europe, generally North America, a little bit of South and Central America, but mostly Canada, the U.S., and parts of Europe.
Okay, that's exciting. You're still in the game and you still like gold.
Oh yeah,
I'm glad to hear that.
yeah.
Like gold, like we haven't seen the spillover. Like gold's trading at almost an all-time high and no one likes it yet.
Yeah, you look at the TSXV, it's still near all-time lows.
Mhm.
Like you'd hope a story like yours and ours now that brings a rush of people into the mining space, but you're still not really seeing it, right?
No,
Yeah,
no one cares yet.
yeah.
I guess I had a question regarding, I guess, your CPC and maybe managing expectations. Like CJ mentioned, the stock went up a gillion% or whatever it was. But did you make any mistakes of not managing people's expectations, or have any advice to me as a younger CEO of how to manage expectations, I guess?
Well, there's a few things. Like I would, based on my experience, I would say, like, really don't neglect the retail shareholder base. Those guys set the price in the market a lot of the time. They're a lot of work. Like you have to have a lot and a lot of phone calls. But the funny thing about like this is expectations on return. And if you can avoid layering in some of the institutional guys until a later point, I mean, they're less motivated. Like people, because the CEOs are focused on getting name recognition and sort of discovery recognition and long-term financial support. They're looking for deep-pocketed groups, right? So there tends to be a focus on trying to get in institutional money at a really early stage. I would advise that if it's possible, keep that retail shareholder base further as your dominant base, and those institutional guys ultimately they'll come in, right? They'll come in and they're looking to double their money or make 15% or whatever. They're not looking to make 20 times their money like a retail guy is. So I mean, like, if you can bring them in later, they're great shareholders to layer in once you've built up a core of value. And so that'd be one way to manage expectations, is basically like once you're predominantly held by powerful institutions, they're going to have a lot of say on what you can do, the kind of values that you can anticipate achieving. So, if you can keep it a little more tightly knit on the retail side, a little bit more owned on the retail side, and just let those guys come in once you've achieved those next levels of valuation. And that'll manage it'll mesh. Like the retail guys are maybe going to see some more like multiples of their initial investment, rather than if you're a fund manager, you're really looking to make your bonus every year, and your bonus is going to be based on making it could be single digit percent returns on your investment. You may not be in there for the long haul to make 20 times, right? So just think about that shareholder mix, and it can mesh your ultimate share performance with your personal preference and your retail shareholder base.
Yeah, that's actually great advice.
If it's possible, right?
So, like when you were raising, large amounts at a time, did you have a banker? Were you engaged with one and they were doing bought deals for you? Or was it mostly like you wanted to decide where the money was going?
It was by that point, it was there was bought deals that were being offered to us, right? So, and we'd have the ability, obviously, of a president's list in these things where you're re-upping your retail shareholders, but largely at those points, you're bringing in the larger funds. Fortunately for us, this was in the multiple dollar range to into teens, right? To get the value up to those levels.
Yeah, like right now where RAMP is, we're at 80 cents, 85 cents. It's a great time to talk to the retail investors, grow the company, get it to that multi-dollar level. Then maybe you're ready for a bought deal. But for now, it's a lot easier to manage relationships on the retail side. And actually, a few of them, like they're becoming friends. Like they want to call you every 2 weeks and see how the story's doing. And it's actually fun dealing with the retail guy sometimes over a banker, right? But
one of my retail shareholder friends, a guy named Raju, just sent me a text, or he tried to call me, seeing what I'm up to. So here we are, like 2 years later, and we're friends. We just shoot the breeze every once in a while. So these are great guys,
that's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Makes the job worth it, right? You're building relationships and friendships
Well, that's
along the way.
great to see
Yeah.
how you transform people's lives. Like, and that's really what our industry is about. Like, you make a huge positive impact on the communities in the vicinity of your project. You know, these guys are on board with the work, then everybody benefits. And you're also your shareholders. You see how the win changes everybody's lives. It's amazing. You know, I had a big shareholder that owns about 1 million shares of Great Bear going through transactions. So, you know, just on the face of it, that's like a $30 million win plus the royalty spin out. And, you know, the guy had a lot of difficult past life. He lost a daughter and everything. And, you know, this is money that ultimately turns into charitable donations and research towards diseases. And yeah, people spend it on their families and other things as well. But it's amazing the positive impacts that you wouldn't anticipate that come out with helping out just normal people achieve, you know, their own better versions of their lives.
How did you become part of the discovery group? You were able to surround yourself with such great people, and I imagine supported you through your endeavors. Like how, like, was that something that you started with them, or did they invite you in after a little bit? Like, how do you become a part of like such a cool club?
Like I stole a diamond project from John Robbins. That's
So steal diamond
yeah,
projects
steal
from
a
them.
project from somebody that
Interesting.
you would like to work with, and your first
Yeah.
meeting will be very interesting. You'll either really hit it off because, in case they accidentally drop the claims, which was the case with John when I was talking to him, and then we really, or you know, maybe they'll just punch you in the face and walk away. But you know, I initially it was because I was getting involved with the Diamond Project. You know, I ultimately had Chuck Fipke as an investor in that one. And then, yeah, like the claims initially had belonged to John. So after I got to know John, there was another fellow I know. His name is Jeff Sundar. He's now in the CPC shell on the board with me. But he had made some introductions to the group initially. So I met Jim Peterson. I met him. I met John a little bit earlier, but I really got to know John through that claim acquisition, and that was quite interesting. So, you know, once you make a good contact like that way, and you see that you have a lot of overlap in the way that you're thinking, you know, as a young guy setting out in the industry at the time, I just didn't have the financial contacts or the ability to raise money in the same way. So you're really trying to line up with people with a good track record on that score. And, you know, that's really how it got going.
I always like that group is so grounded, but like they've done so well. Jim, like when I first started off in the industry, he had all the time in the world for a kid like me. Like I didn't know anything, but you know, like, and you don't forget that kind of stuff, right?
No,
Uh,
never.
So, good group of people around you, or what's going on? Good.
Yeah, look, like I said, when I started the company, or when I teamed up with Garrett and Brett, my business partner was Prit Singh, and we are friends before business partners. And he had success at a young age on Bay Street. He took a few deals public and did quite well, and started his firm Thesis Capital. So he really helped on the IR side, bringing in call it the retail shareholders and some guys at Canaccord in the early days. But then Garrett was like, you should just reach out to Mark Bennett and show him our data. And that was really call it a TSN changing moment or whatever it's called in Ramp Metals history, that Mark Bennett joined our team because we're starting to bring on more experienced people to our advisory, along with Richard Murphy and Scott McLean. I felt as a junior company, you really need to surround yourself with good people. And look, I think we're still a small team, and we need to continue to grow as well. So, like with what Chris did when he was getting closer to the resource stage, he started bringing on a guy that can be a COO, right, and actually run a mine, because you do want to take a company. You don't want to just say we're for sale. You want to try to build a mine if you can, and if an offer comes before that, and if it makes sense for shareholders, you take it, right?
That's cool. So I imagine discovery groups like coaching tree, you know, when you ever see that and you see like this guy came from here, but they all like came from the coaching tree. We have like one little thing coming out of the Gold Spot camp, and it's Jordan Black because he was like just success. Probably
Yeah, like going back to the Gold Spot days, that like I really knew nothing about exploration. I was building mines, like infrastructure for mines, and I really liked it, and I was investing my own money into companies. But then I really got to see, I guess, how exploration worked through this new AI technology. And the whole point of that was to make a geologist's job happen faster, right? Like, can we reduce the drilling time by 3 months by honing down targets? Like, that's what I found fascinating. And I've always been an advocate of new technology, and that's what I really like. So if we can combine the new tech and the old tech, so you got the science part, and then mix a little bit of art on top of that, because it's the guys spend 10 years with the science and they'll miss, right? So you need a little bit of luck combined with that AI and science.
Yeah.
I think.
For sure. Well, we took up a lot of your time, Chris. Do you have any other questions while he's on the line? Like, he's a wealth of knowledge here, right?
Yeah, look, I think you've answered a couple questions so far. We're gonna try to drill our first, I guess, 5,000 meters next. So we have that covered off. I guess what would be your, I guess, intermediate advice for ramp? So you gave me some CEO advice. What do you think we should do as a company, high level, over the next year?
I guess, like, yeah, 5,000 meters is a good amount of drilling. Like, you can't expect to hit on every hole. And, make sure that you go in with a sufficient program that it can tolerate some of the misses along with the hits. And, like, that would be my main advice when you're at this early precious stage, is like, make sure that the data modeling and everything is done to the maximum amount before those holes get in, right? Because the luck element is certainly useful. But the market loves to see an even better hole follow up on the first really good one. So, don't skimp on the 3D modeling, basically, and always drill oriented core if you can. So,
for sure, yeah. No, the first 4 holes, because there's only 4 holes, we didn't orient to the core, but we did leave the casing in so we can actually go through the existing hole and maybe drill it from 300 to 600 or whatever is needed, and then slowly step out and make sure we cover all our bases.
Our first holes weren't oriented either. I mean, it's the kind of thing you do once you're into the bigger programs, and you've got some structural complexities you need to sort out. So, but it's worth its weight in physical gold, I guess, metaphorical and physical gold later on.
So, when are you drilling again?
So we're going to head out there and do a nice bedrock mapping program. Like, we've never really done grid surface sampling. So let's chase down the fault a little bit, hone down the drilling targets, and then ideally we get out there in the fall.
Okay. Very cool. And so, Chris, hopefully we get to meet you in person and buy you a peach schnapps for all this cool advice. Actually, Jordan will do it. You just basically got a master's in junior exploration from the guy who coined the Taylor sale.
Exactly. You always have to learn, and you have to pay for that education in schnapps, right?
Yeah.
Well,
really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, guys. And it was great having a chat.
All right.